Hi everyone, Patrick Menninga here, spiritualriver.com, coming to you with today's show, and we're going to talk about complacency a bit. We're going to take a viewer question from someone in the forum, and I'm going to give you a quote, and then we'll do an action item and an assignment for you. So let's get into this. Today's topic is complacency, and this is something that I see a lot of in my own recovery and also in the people around me that are, living in recovery. Some of them have multiple years. Some of them only have, a few months in sobriety. But complacency is when someone, myself or others in recovery, get comfortable in what they're doing to stay clean and sober, and they get so comfortable that they forget to start to keep pushing themselves towards personal growth. So you get complacent and you kind of get a little lazy in your recovery efforts, and there's a danger when that happens that you may relapse at some point. I've seen this happen in different ways with different people that have been around me in recovery, and I believe it's probably the biggest danger other than resentments. It's very dangerous to recovery, and the problem with complacency is that by the time you see it in yourself, it might be too late. It's probably too late to do anything about it. You've already relapsed, and you look back at what happened with your addiction, your recovery. You were going along, you got complacent, and you relapsed. And now you can look back at that. Maybe you're trying to get clean and sober again, and you can say, okay, I got complacent, I got lazy. And the problem there is that the complacency comes with denial. That denial is a part of complacency. So how do you get around that? How do you fight through that? Well, there's a couple of things. One is that if other people are around you in recovery and they see you becoming complacent and they say, hey, Patrick, what are you really doing for your recovery lately? I don't see you pushing the way you used to. And if enough people are saying that to you, or even if one person says that to you, you might kind of say, oh, gee, I am kind of becoming complacent. So staying plugged into a recovery network, whether that's peers who are also trying to recover, or if that's going to AA meetings every day, or maybe it's a religious community, whatever it is, if you've got people around you who are sort of watching you and seeing how your recovery is going, they can help hold you accountable. Now, whether or not you're willing to listen to that feedback and take action on it, that's entirely up to you. And to be honest, I'm not necessarily good at receiving that kind of feedback and using it to break through my own denial. I would like to sit here and tell you that if somebody says that, I'll say, oh yeah, you're right, I am doing that. I need to take a look at my recovery and make some changes. The truth is, I get defensive like anyone else. And so the solution for that, in my opinion, is not to rely on other people to call you out and hold you accountable. The solution is to make an assumption right now. And normally assumptions are bad, don't get me wrong, but this one's healthy. If you assume right now that you're becoming complacent in your recovery, then what does that do for you? It gets you in the mindset to say, I might be complacent. What do I need to change? What do I need to work on? What part of my recovery is failing right now? What part of my life and my personal growth and my recovery efforts have I been slacking off on lately? And so it's a little bit like the 9th step in AA and NA, where we take a daily inventory. It's kind of that same concept. It's to say, okay, let's make an assumption right now. And in the future, let's make this assumption on a continuous basis to say, okay, I'm probably missing something. I'm probably slacking off in some way. I probably need to do more for myself in recovery. What is that? And sometimes you can see it yourself and you'll say, okay, yeah, I know I've been slacking off in this area. I got to do better. Or sometimes you might have no clue, but you're not necessarily real happy with the way things have been going in your life, and therefore you might ask for help and say, my sponsor, or the people at the AA meeting I go to all the time, or my therapist. Let me ask you, what do you think I need to be working on? What do you think's tripping me up right now? What do you think's my biggest problem right now in my life and in my recovery efforts? And so that assumption that you are complacent, that I'm complacent right now, that's a powerful thing. Make that assumption and then sort of do the work from there to figure out where you need to apply your recovery efforts and make some real growth in your recovery. Let's move on to the viewer question. Someone in our audience, someone on the forum of Spiritual River asked a question recently, and they said, hey, I'm coming up to some downtime, and I believe it was time off work, that normally they work a full-time job, and they've got a couple weeks off in a row that if they don't take the time off, they're going to lose it anyway, kind of thing. And so they're taking this time off. They're going to have downtime. And since they've become clean and sober, they're not used to that. And they've always sort of had this routine, and they've been plugged into this routine, and it's been working for them, and now they're nervous that they're going to have this downtime. And when they asked this question, I could really relate to it because I've had similar feelings in my own life when, for example, I was living in basically a halfway house for a long time in my recovery, and I had a routine, and I was staying clean and sober, and I had this routine, and got to the point where, okay, I'm going to have to move out and be on my own. And I did have a job at the time, but I didn't have a lot of commitments outside of that job, and I didn't have a lot going on. And it was kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? What's that going to be like for me? Am I going to be climbing the walls, and am I going to go crazy? Am I going to want to drink again as a result of that? So I definitely relate to this question that the person in the Spiritual River Forum posed to me. And so my answer for that about 13 or 14 years ago, when I went through that period, was to say, okay, I'm nervous and I don't want to relapse. So what do I need to do to stay clean and sober in terms of my own life and my personal growth and the things I'm doing for my recovery? And so essentially what I did at that time, back then, was I kind of broke it down and I looked at every area of my life and I said, okay, I'm going to start making checklists of things that I need to do every day to know that I'm being healthy and staying healthy and doing the things I need to do to recover. And so I actually made a checklist of okay, I'm going to write in a journal today. I'm going to reach out to a friend in recovery every single day of my life and have a conversation about recovery with at least one person a day. If you go to meetings, you could insert that and say, I'm going to go to one AA or NA meeting a day. Exercise was a huge piece of that for me, is to say, even if I don't feel like it, even if I'm tired and I don't feel like doing it, I'm going to get out there and I'm going to exercise every single day because I know that that's a healthy piece of my recovery and of my personal growth. And so it wasn't just for me to say, okay, AA meetings help me and I'm going to go to a meeting every day. It was more than that. I had to look at the other pieces of my life. I had to look at the relationships, the positive people who had a good influence on me, and how am I going to connect with those people on a regular basis? How am I going to stay plugged into all of these things? The exercise, the relationships, writing and exploring through writing in a journal every day. I had to make that checklist and check those things off. That's what worked for me at the time, and I would say that continues to work for me in long-term recovery in terms of my routines and the kinds of things I do every day. It's still kind of that same thing. I still write and explore where I'm at through my writing, and I still connect with many different kinds of people who are in recovery. Some of them are into AA and NA, some of them are just into personal growth, all of those different avenues. So that is what I would say as an answer to that person on the forum, is that it comes back to that holistic piece and the personal growth that you engage in on a daily basis, and to actually write it down and have a checklist. And in doing that, in writing it down, I think it alleviated a lot of the anxiety for myself, because now I had a plan and it was written down, and that gave me the confidence I needed to keep moving forward and to say, okay, even though I've got this thing coming up where there's a whole lot of downtime, I'm not just going to relapse and it's not just going to be a disaster. I've got these things in place that I can do. The quote for today's show, the quote is, what we fear the most is what we most need to do. And I've definitely found that to be true in my own experience. That was especially true for me in early recovery when I was so afraid to go to treatment. I was so afraid to pick up the phone and call a treatment center and get back into detox. I'd done it before and I kind of knew what it was about, but I still had this overwhelming fear and anxiety of just being sober and giving up the alcohol and the drugs again. And I just didn't want to make that leap of faith. I was so scared. I had so much fear and anxiety. And so that the thing you fear the most, that's what you need to do. Again, in early recovery, I faced kind of the same issue in terms of going to meetings, going to AA meetings and reaching out to other people in recovery, talking with a therapist and opening up and doing that kind of getting that level of confidence where you open up and you get past that sort of that shell and break through that wall. Again, same thing. I was so afraid to do that. Even when I had a couple months clean and sober, I was still held back in that way. And again, that's where the personal growth was, that I wasn't able to accelerate my personal growth until I got past that fear and I started opening up and sort of getting that feedback from people and getting off in a new direction in terms of personal growth. Our assignment for today, if we would give you one action item to work on, here's what my assignment would be for you, is to make a checklist, that holistic checklist, and for yourself, as suggested earlier, and just to put one thing on it. So maybe that's, take a walk in terms of exercise tomorrow, or maybe it's to reach out to one person in recovery and have a face-to-face conversation with them. Or maybe it's to, go on the Spiritual River Forum and post and share a bit of yourself and where you're at in recovery. Whatever it is, just put one item on your to-do list for tomorrow in terms of that holistic health and how you're going to move forward with your own personal growth. So that's it for today's show. If you found it helpful, please share it with other people in recovery, and hope to see you at the next show. Thanks.